This world begins to exist for you only from the moment you awaken in it. Up to this point, you are in the subtle world and you absolutely do not care about this world. Why is this happening? Upon awakening, our consciousness goes through 3 stages. The first stage, it is the realization that I am. The second stage, we begin to feel our body. The third stage, we begin to become aware of the world around us. When we wake up naturally, all these 3 stages, although they are sequential, are invisible to us and occur simultaneously. It's another matter if we are forcibly awakened. Here these stages can be clearly traced. You were woken up, awareness manifested in the body I am. You feel your body, but you are not fully aware of the world around you. More precisely, for the first few seconds you are not aware of it at all. A vacuum is forming in your mind, and only after the time has elapsed from a few seconds to several minutes, sounds break into consciousness, images appear and a picture of the surrounding world begins to emerge. The divine spark I am returns to our body. If the I am does not return, we will not be able to awaken. You may have noticed that when we sleep, we are not aware of what is happening around us. Although some part of consciousness in the body is preserved to maintain life, but it is only after returning to the body of the conscious one that the surrounding world manifests in our consciousness. In fact, for us, the world begins to exist only from the moment of awakening. Agree that this is similar to booting a computer when you turn it on. Life on Earth will continue without us, but we won't care about that. New worlds will open up before us. Of course, this can be called fiction, but each of us has experienced it for himself at least once in his life. For example, why is it difficult for many of us to wake up? Sleep is such a completely familiar and mundane process. Nevertheless, it still eludes our understanding. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of times, we fall asleep and wake up during our lives and take this process for granted. We don't need to learn to sleep and stay awake. We are endowed with this gift from nature, and it happens in a way by itself. The American philosopher Daniel Dennett introduced the concept of competence without understanding, which perfectly characterizes sleep. We don't need to know what sleep is in order to fall asleep and wake up. We just sleep, not thinking why we are doing this, and what kind of amazing condition it is that takes away a third of our lives. And the less we try to actively, consciously participate in the process of falling asleep, the easier it comes. Curiously, unlike many other behaviors that improve with lifelong experience, sleep only gets worse. As if with age we forget how to sleep and the management of our sleep and the ability to control it, including the moment of falling asleep and the process of returning to wakefulness, become less and less subject to us. The transition from sleep to wakefulness, or the return from the otherworldly world of sleep to reality, has earned many emotional descriptions, which are nothing more than timid attempts to put into verbal form what can only be felt and experienced personally. For us, awakening is a process that inextricably connects our inner and outer worlds. It can only be understood if it is viewed both from the inside and from the outside. At the moment of awakening, the world of non-existence or fantastic dreams materializes, transforms into tangible forms of the external world, and he, in turn, begins to act on us again, and we regain our habitual ability to respond to him. Sleep is determined primarily by the interaction between us and the outside world, and not only by what happens in the depths of the brain, where billions of neurons, staying in the eternal darkness of the skull, are working hard to decipher and systematize the information flows that come through the senses. The brain wakes up, and with it the mind returns. Today we know that the brain is active during sleep and the appearance of sparks of light is nothing more than a metaphor. It is not easy to determine what a dream is. Usually, its description implies a simple exclusion of the characteristics of wakefulness. For example, sleep is a condition that is associated with a lack of movement and the ability to consciously respond to external influences. And being awake in this case is the opposite. But is it true? Wakefulness is determined, firstly, by the ability to receive and perceive information coming from the environment. Secondly, the ability to react to it in one way or another. To respond to the environment, to influence it, which usually happens through movement. This does not happen in a dream. Such circular descriptions do not always help, but alas, there is nothing better at our disposal so far. The possible occurrence of hallucinations at the moment of awakening reflects the brain's attempts to explain and bring two streams of information into harmony, coming from within and from outside, and resolve the conflicts that arise between them. This kind of contradiction manifests itself in the phenomenon of hypnotic twitching, a characteristic sensation of falling asleep, from which a person instantly wakes up. The origin of this phenomenon is unclear, but it may be related to the simultaneous falling asleep of different parts of the brain. Those areas that are responsible for maintaining muscle tone at some point stop receiving inhibitory effects from other brain structures or misinterpret muscle relaxation, taking it for the danger of loss of balance. In response, the brain instantly reproduces the process of falling in the imagination and forms an adequate reaction to prevent it. Eliminate a non-existent drop. Time seems to be going backwards at this moment. The fall has not yet happened in reality, but the answer to it, awakening, has already been formed. Hypnotic twitching is one of the wonderful examples of sleep-related phenomena that can be speculated with enthusiasm without knowing a specific and exhaustive answer. However, this is how science usually develops, because imagination precedes knowledge, and one of the ways of cognition is movement itself. Socrates' famous aphorism about self-knowledge, a biological matrix, which in its evolutionary development goes back to the awareness of one's own body, the feeling of its position in space and its movement. Another aspect related to waking up is the inertia of sleep. The transition from sleep to wakefulness does not happen suddenly, it is a gradual process, and we immediately feel unusual after waking up. The initial period of wakefulness is usually characterized by a reduced level of attention, some disorientation in time and space. Where am I? What time is it? And a distinct subjective feeling of incomplete wakefulness. This condition is often called sleep inertia. It is noteworthy that sleep inertia is not only and not just a subjective phenomenon, it has a clearly defined, but also insufficiently understood, neurophysiological basis. Scientists in the laboratories immediately after the subjects woke up, in the first minutes of their wakefulness, recorded characteristic changes in certain frequency ranges of the electroencephalogram, as well as changes in the evoked potentials of the brain and a decrease in cognitive functions. By the way, it is known that a very short nap can be much more refreshing than a long one, at least on a subjective level. One of the reasons for this is precisely the inertia of sleep, which does not manifest itself to a significant extent after its superficial stages. However, if you allow sleep to continue to develop and get to its deep stages, then the inertia of sleep can almost negate all the benefits of sleep. So what happens in the brain after waking up? Recent studies on laboratory rodents have revealed that the activity of neurons in the cerebral cortex is somewhat reduced immediately after awakening. In other words, the number of electrical discharges, also called nerve impulses that neurons exchange information with, was 15 to 20% lower in the first few minutes after spontaneous awakening from sleep compared to the average values during wakefulness. Moreover, the pattern of activity discharges resembled brain activity during sleep rather than during wakefulness. Otherwise, on the one hand, the mouse has already woken up, and on the other hand, not quite. According to some data, immediately after waking up, the mouse can be in both states, awake and asleep, at the same time. However, just like you and me, the simultaneous coexistence of wakefulness and sleep is most pronounced in cases when we are forcibly deprived of sleep and, for sure, with certain violations of it. In any case, the idea that has existed for thousands of years, we are either awake or asleep, without intermediate states, in a sense, outdated. The point of view that sleep and wakefulness are not mutually exclusive states is not new in itself. Assumptions that only certain brain centers that are responsible for consciousness or sensory perception sleep during sleep, that the brain does not sleep completely, have been expressed for quite a long time. Scientists who recognize sleep as a stop or diastole of brain activity are mistaken, since during sleep the brain does not sleep at all, does not completely remain inactive, and only those parts of it that make up the anatomical basis, the anatomical substrate of consciousness, are subject to falling asleep. Sleep is a time of rest for our consciousness. We bravely fall asleep every night, having no doubt that we will return to the waking state the next morning, and do not think about why and how we wake up at all. How, in a state of altered, if not absent, consciousness, do we manage to track the passage of time in order to sleep exactly the 7 or 8 hours due to us? Surprisingly, progress in the development of new technologies and methods for studying the brain and the acquisition of new knowledge does not so much bring us closer to understanding the nature of sleep, as it opens up hitherto unknown levels of complexity of this process.